Today we have Dr. Rachel Turow. She's a practicing clinical psychologist, a researcher, and an author. Her first book was Mindfulness Skills and for trauma and PTSD. And now her latest book, The Self-Talk Workout, it has 6 science-based strategies to dissolve self-criticism and transform the voice in your head. And I am a psychologist in India, and I do my own therapy work and now these videos and podcasts. And I'm very interested to know not just about her work, but her life as a psychologist in USA also. So welcome, Dr. Rachel Turow.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the work that you do, and I'm glad to learn more about your perspectives as well.
Yeah. So we'll see. Because the thing is, I want to know about is, I have seen the field of psychology in India, and from our perspective, things that we actually learn, right? Like things that we actually read in our curriculum, they largely come from the work from Western authors, right? Like it could be European or USA. So because the field of psychology is way more advanced there, right? So a few questions that I had first was, so in India, what happens is, to become a psychologist right now, you do an MA and you can start actually taking sessions. But if you want to be a clinical psychologist, there is an MPhil thing, another 2 years. So this is my personal curiosity. In USA right now, what does it take to become a clinical psychologist? How many hours of training and what degrees? Please tell us.
Sure. Well, to become a clinical psychologist, you need the Ph.D. degree, which is usually a 5-year program, plus afterwards a clinical internship. That's a year-long internship. Sometimes people also do a postdoctoral fellowship. That's to become a clinical psychologist, but that's not the only way to be a counselor or a therapist. We actually have many different degree programs. So if people are interested, I encourage people to investigate a lot of them. There's a master's in social work degree, MSW. There are lots of wonderful social workers who help people with mental health. There is also a degree called a PsyD degree, which is a little more, it's a little more clinically oriented. So my degree was sort of split between clinical work and research. A PsyD degree is more focused on actually working with patients. So there are a few different ways to go. You could also get a master's degree in counseling and become a counselor. You wouldn't have the psychologist title, but you'd still be doing a lot of the same type of work. So there are several ways to go about it.
Even with that, there must be some certain hours that you have to work under supervision, right? Before you get the license to actually practice, yeah?
Yes, that's absolutely right. After you finish the degree program, it's usually an hour, a year, not an hour, an hour, a certain number of hours, it could be 2,000 hours up to 5,000 hours of supervised practice.
Yeah, because I have heard that the process is the most stringent in US, as compared to even UK, Australia. People get licenses actually rather at least much more quickly than they do in US. I'm not exactly sure, but this is what we have heard from people, people that I know have gone outside and studying, and trying to actually practice there. US seems to be the hardest. And even I'm in favor of that also, because in India, we do need more regulation, because right now, with very little practice, almost anybody can come in. And I'm also a beneficiary of that, I have to admit. But it's just that I had to develop my own skills kind of on my own. It was not required by the people or the government or let's say the institutions. So that is something I think we are still in the early stages of that. So and now your work, you said you did the PhD, right? So and your research work also. Is it mostly is it a very case study based thing, or do you do it with a group of people or with a standardized procedure, which is we'll take a certain population and have a certain interventions and see what kind of research do you do? A very important factor in mental peace is that instead of just thinking internally, you should be able to talk about your frustrations to someone. But sometimes your friends and family can get tired of listening or might not even understand you well. That's why you should talk to a therapist. Your emotions need regular air ventilation. Your thoughts need regular garbage disposal, once every week with a trained therapist. At Sridhar Life School, we have a team of therapists that you can talk to. Please go to sridharlifeschool.com to book your sessions.
My original research was a lot of survey research. So people do, pencil and paper self-report instruments to describe different aspects of how they're feeling and how it might have related, for instance, to trauma or difficult things that they've been through, because we know that stress and trauma are linked with depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress. And I was interested in what kinds of factors actually help. So I've been studying emotion regulation and mindfulness, mostly doing questionnaire-based research, but then also I did work on a study when I was working at Rush University Medical Center that had a mindfulness-based intervention for folks who had PTSD, post-traumatic stress, or depression after trauma. And then my work now is with university students. And this is a very difficult time to be a university student with this economy, and especially after the past few years with coronavirus, changing everything. So I really feel for my students, and the type of information that I get from them these days is more individualized. I'm interested in knowing which sorts of practices help them the most in terms of how they relate to their own thoughts and feelings in this time of stress.
So the self-talk part, right? Like, how are they talking to themselves? Yes. Yeah. And so tell me about, like, did you see any, so you've been doing this work for last, how long? And this particular...
For about five years. 5 years now.
This part. So did you see any changes because of those stresses that we had even after the pandemic or anything? Like what are your findings? Like, how are children or students talking to themselves? Like, what's happening?
Oh, I think it's just so difficult. The isolation, isolation when people couldn't socialize, it was easier to feel more alone and to blame yourself for feeling bad and feeling stressed. And so it was really interesting to work with people over about a month to see, well, what happens if you implement a different strategy? What happens if you just try a specific practice to treat yourself more kindly, like the loving-kindess meditation or the metta meditation. And people sometimes say that at first it felt strange or corny, uncomfortable, awkward. It didn't feel like them. Yeah. But that after a few weeks of practice, it did change how they felt about themselves and feeling more connected to other people if they practice the loving-kindness meditation or metta for others.
So right now, just the 6 strategies that you mentioned also, right? Like I am very interested to know about them as well. So in your work, are you also conducting like therapy sessions one-on-one, or is mostly like as a group base, you can try these techniques and report the differences, like, or do you do individualized sessions as well, where you actually get to know the individual content? You do?
I do individualized sessions, and I have a small private practice right now. So I'm still a practicing clinical psychologist. But actually, I deliver most of these interventions in a group format.
Group format.
And I appreciate that because I think people blame themselves for feeling bad. They feel like I'm the only one who feels so terrible. What's wrong with me? And I think it's very helpful to know that this is a human issue. So many of us have struggled. I have struggled with lots of self-criticism, feeling bad about myself. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you or me. It's his conditioning over years and decades. We absorb negative information about us, or a consumer culture, or a culture where career success is everything. Then we judge ourselves for not living up to our standards. And these become very powerful mental habits that actually need new conditioning to change.
Yeah. So you mentioned something which actually was going to ask anyway, and which is that you worked a lot on yourself, right? And so this is something that I also relate to, because my process has always been like this. If I really cannot understand something for myself, like how can I educate others about that? And something like if I'm standing up for, in a way, like through my work, I'm a psychologist and working for happiness and well-being. if I let go of my own problems, so let's say just shove them under the carpet and I'm not really stopping and working on them, then how do I encourage others to really say, you know what, stop and work on yourself? So I have had this practice for years with me. Like whenever something bothers or something new comes up, I stop everything and like I prioritize that and try to find different perspectives until it's solved. And the good news is once you solve it properly, deeply, it's kind of solved forever, because if you go to the roots of it. And that's why like the benefit is really multifold, which is it's not going to keep coming back. So now I can, like, again, personally have like so many examples almost operating on my personality from different angles or my ways of thinking. So I want to know for you, like you said, you've been very self-critical. So could you give us an example of what were you hard on yourself about and like how you came over that?
Yes, I think I was hard on myself about most things. Like you, I think you mentioned in one of your videos, I was also kind of taught that your work is the most important thing, right? You want to get your work done and do your work well. And I think that for a lot of us, we aren't really taught, well, how do you take care of yourself emotionally? So that's something I've had to do as an adult. But let's see, I was self-critical about, well, I got good grades, good marks, but I wasn't the best student. So I could always compare myself to somebody smarter. I don't have any very strange looks, but I was definitely not the most attractive. So there was always somebody more beautiful that I could compare myself to and think, okay, well, I'm not really one of the very beautiful people. There were things I didn't like about myself on the inside. Sometimes I felt sad and depressed, and then I blamed myself for feeling sad and depressed. Oh, this is a terrible thing about me. If I were a wonderful person, I would be happy all the time. But I don't think that's the case. I think we learn from experiences, and in many experiences, if you could just decide, to be happy all the time, I think we would all do that. I think sometimes though, just like I would really like to have strong abdominal muscles. I've had 3 children, but just wishing for the strong abdominal muscles doesn't work. I actually need to do some sit-ups and abdominal exercises. And I think training happiness is like that too, that after the experience of maybe not getting the input that we needed about how to build a happy life, how to regulate your emotions, I think this is work that a lot of us have to do to sort of reparent ourselves as adults.
So if you could like take any of those things, it could be marks or looks or like internal, like you could take any of them. And so could you tell us like the new self-talk? Like the earlier one was this key, okay, I'm not enough. Like what's the new look like? What does the new one look like?
The new one, for instance, I like this exercise called Spot the Success. It's one of the ones that I talk about in my book, The Self-Talk Workout. This is meant to counteract the feeling that I'm not doing enough or I'm not enough, because there are so many tasks that I haven't done. I haven't achieved everything that I wanted to or even what I hoped to today. It's very easy to look at what I haven't done, and this exercise helps retrain to look at what I have done. So the idea with Spot the Success is to list 10 things that have gone well today to which you contributed, and no item is too small. So did you get out of bed? Yes. And that might seem, okay, insignificant, easy to dismiss, but your day is much different than if you had stayed in bed all day. You got up, that's still meaningful. And can you take a moment to appreciate, marinate, and soak in that feeling that, okay, yes, I did this. Perhaps you took a vitamin or had breakfast or prepared breakfast for somebody else. Maybe you sent an email. Maybe you texted your friend. These all seem like little things. They're easy to dismiss, but you're nurturing a relationship, you're nurturing your body, and these are meaningful actions. So if you can get into the habit of every day noticing these things that you have done and just taking a moment to appreciate them, that can sort of help counteract the sense, okay, I'm not enough. Oh, yes. Okay. But actually I did do these things and they do matter. So my students have reported that they liked this exercise for a few reasons. They felt sometimes it actually gave them momentum. If they kind of said, oh, I'm not achieving enough, it's easy to just stay in a funk and you don't feel motivated. But you say, oh, I did this, I did that, I did this other thing. It generates more positive energy in your body and maybe
that's
you
a good
do
point,
more.
Yeah. No, continue. Sorry. And you're
it could also help you relax. Maybe also feel like, okay, I'm a person who does things instead of I'm a terrible person not doing enough. Oh, no, but I did this thing. This was helpful.
So
this
like
mattered.
your emotional, again, state, that changes. And of course, it puts you into some action as well, right? Like it actually,
Yes.
and in fact, this answers a question that I get asked so many times whenever. So people, when they have, they usually have a hard time dealing with paradoxes. For example, if you tell them you can be satisfied or just with whatever you have done, whatever little you have done. And so many times the counter question you get is, so like, does that mean you just become idle and don't grow and lose your ambition and don't push yourself and just be in your bad circumstances, don't solve problems? So they go to that other extreme. And in fact, that's like a bad conclusion from this, because we can have both, which is we can be happy right now, but we can also have desires to still keep growing, right? Still keep so I always say ki, if you cannot accept yourself first, and if you just keep on growing, no matter how much you grow, you will still feel dissatisfied. So I'm saying ki, just you can accept yourself, but that doesn't take away growth from you, right? And what you just mentioned is actually an additional benefit there, which is the fact that you can keep your successes in mind. It tells you that if I could do that, I could do more, right? That momentum in that. So that's actually an interesting point too. So yeah. Now, so even in this self-talk, another point that is like probably the most difficult part is, which I wanted to answer, like how do you particularly deal with that, which is the social comparison, like you also mentioned earlier. And we call it upward social comparison, right? Like when you do that, it's just harder on you. And for gratitude practices, you usually do the downward. But the thing is, like however, the way you want to look, whatever you want to achieve, you do get all your benchmarks from the culture, from other people, right? Technically, if you take it at a very biological point of view, which is I'm here to survive and reproduce, let's say, okay, the completely genetic view, almost everybody's managing it. And if you take the biological view, everybody can be happy. Okay, I've done the biological diktat, but that's not it, right? We see life and we see what a good normal life is from other people. We get those benchmarks and you compare and you ultimately criticize yourself. Okay, why am I not enough, right? So this, how do you approach that, like dealing with the constant comparisons? Yeah.
This is an excellent question. And I think it's also leads to this idea of self-esteem. So we are in a culture with other people. It's normal to compare yourself to some degree, right? We see other people doing things. This is how to act. This is what success means. So I think on some level that's normal, but it can spin out of control where we're always assessing how do we stack up, match up against other people. And of course, there's influences, right? Like grades or exams or how much money people earn or beauty contest. We have this whole sort of culture about competition. It's a very competitive culture. Yeah. And so how do we exist in that space? Well, not all of the research or directions in Western psychology have been positive. And in the 1980s, there was this movement for self-esteem. Okay, well, just tell yourself all the time that you're wonderful, you're beautiful, everything's going to go great.
The participation trophies.
Out that didn't, it didn't work. I mean, people had a nice idea. It was a good intention. But the problem with self-esteem is that it's still evaluating yourself. Am I good? Oh, yes, I'm good. And it's still measuring yourself against other people. Oh, I'm a good driver. Oh, I'm a good parent. And so actually the cure is to evaluate yourself a little bit less, still act in line with your goals and your values, but without the constant evaluation of how good you are and how you measure up to other people. And a wonderful antidote for that is the loving-kindness meditation. I know I keep talking about it. It doesn't come from the West, and it is the metta meditation, something along the lines of silently repeating phrases for yourself and someone else that wish well. So, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I live with ease. In a mantra meditation over a period of several minutes, and then for somebody else, may you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. And this helps dissolve comparison, because wishing myself well and wishing you well, this is not about how good you are. This is not evaluating. This is no matter what's going on, I wish myself well, and I wish you well, and I wish all the drivers around me well, whether or not I think they're good drivers. I might not think they're good drivers. I still wish them well. And that helps balance out this constant measuring and evaluating.
So if it does, have you observed this in your practice, or there has been research just based on this, which is loving kindness could lead to reduction in comparison? Is there?
Yes. Excellent research showing that loving kindness meditation, you can, Google it, LKM, or loving kindness meditation, reduces stress, depression, post-traumatic stress, and self-criticism. And that's the piece that I really like to focus on, because self-criticism is a transdiagnostic risk factor. It is associated with higher levels, not of just depression, but of anxiety, drug use, eating disorders, suicidal thoughts and behaviors. So self-criticism is very dangerous. And the evidence shows that this loving kindness meditation can reduce self-criticism and depression.
And you're saying self-criticism is attached to comparison. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
So in a way, it's indirectly kind of helping you with reducing because your self-criticism is also coming from that comparison also, right? Because the benchmarks are the other people, and that's how you're criticizing.
Yes, in fact, the social media use is linked with self-criticism. And of course, some people use social media wonderfully. I think you use it really in a fantastic way. And so it can be very useful, but it can also have this downside of comparing yourself to others and feeling self-critical.
So, and because this is something also which is alien to me, I'll admit, because my approach has been very usually CBT based for myself at least, and usually for my clients, which is I try to go down to the exact thought, which is so for example, if somebody is comparing themselves to somebody else for, let's say, on the basis of income. So I usually try to take that thought and try to give them different perspectives on, let's say, money, right? Money, what's the utility of money? How much do you need it? And how ultimately there will somebody always be ahead of you, somebody behind you. So multiple perspectives around that particular thought. But this is good news to understand that there are these generic good practices, let's say loving kindness, which even if, let's say, you don't have enough wisdom or perspectives to address that particular thought or particular perspective belief, you can still improve a lot about how you feel and what you do and in relation to yourself, right? So that's like a fit for all kind of pill. Just as sometimes I call gratitude that, wherever you are, if you can just whatever you're feeling, if you can find find a way to feel a little more grateful, it's almost guaranteed to make you feel better, because there's always something to be grateful of, right? If you're thinking, if you're alive, you can be grateful of that too. So in that way, I guess this loving kindness probably is like that solution. If you just do this on a regular basis, it has this overall impact on how you're thinking and feeling. Yeah.
I agree with you. And it's funny because my training was also very focused on cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Yeah.
And in the book that I just wrote, The Self-Talk Workout, I present these different strategies, and some are based on CBT and some are not. And that is because people are different and they have different preferences. So that exercise that I mentioned, Spot the Success, where you list 10 things that you've done that have been helpful, that is really cognitive therapy, right? You instead of the old thoughts, you're thinking new thoughts on purpose, and it's a form of cognitive reappraisal. But the loving kindness meditation, that is a different direction that I learned about after graduate school.
In a way, we can put everything under the umbrella of CBT, but because in a way, because you cannot do anything beyond your cognition. But the idea here is how specific you are with the belief. What you're saying is that even these general ones also have a lot of protective factors. Oh, sorry. And you were saying something also. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I was just going to mention, though, that sometimes when I was doing kind of very traditional CBT, I felt as though people didn't always respond well, because sometimes it can come across as your thinking is bad and you need to think different thoughts. And then people are like, I was already depressed and now I'm terrible at having thoughts and now I feel worse about myself. And of course, a skilled CBT provider could sort of help work with those ideas. But sometimes I think it is hard to adopt a new thought, even if you know rationally that that thought is better. You might just not be able to get the new thought to really come in and integrate. And that's one of the things that I think is interesting about CBT. We kind of like to focus on the C, but the B, the behavior, that can also really help, because sometimes if it's really hard to just think a new thought, trying out a new behavior is more concrete. So the evidence shows that, for instance, even if you feel sort of low and depressed, behavioral activation or doing actions aligned with your behavior can actually change your thoughts. So sometimes if the cognitions aren't really a helpful way to work, the behaviors could be very helpful, or the mindfulness practices. So you do have a choice.
For sure. Because this is where personality really plays a role. So for example, again, we can take the Big Five model only. Let's say somebody is by their personality, they are very, very anxious. And they are just like predicting a lot of threats and of course failures in the future, and they're constantly worried about that. Even though now rationally you can tell them, even let's say you can imagine the worst case scenario and you can live it, right? And it's not going to be that bad. That's one perspective. Another one could be you can give them different examples of how the probability of something happening is actually pretty low. And they may actually understand it really well. But I guess if your way of perceiving the world, if you're just very like you're always spotting, like you're always just vigilant for what can go wrong, and you're just fear-based personality, like if you're high on that trait, then you're right that the rational thinking, even it may click here, but the emotional part, the way they react to the word and the way they feel internally, that wouldn't change so quickly. That may take like a really long time before their whole body responds to it, right? So this is something I noticed when I wanted to change something deep in my personality. So for example, like I keep doing experiments with myself also. So usually, let's say it could be simply about how I'm behaving socially, right? So in social settings, sometimes earlier I had the habit of just maybe being a little too extra agreeable, which is even before somebody has, like, let's say fully finished something, or let's say somebody is talking, but I don't exactly agree with the point, but I would always just nod along. And that was just my default, right? Which is, I couldn't even keep a neutral face. I would almost give them the impression that, okay, I've just agreed with you, right? And then I realized that's not what I want to do. I want to be able to be neutral and say my part. And it clicked me like, okay, I understood that I have to change this, but to actually put it into practice, my default just nodding and smiling, nodding, it was just so hard to change. So have you, like, the phenomena that I'm just saying, like, do you have any thoughts on this? Like, have you observed something like this, or like, what exactly is this?
I really resonates with me, what you're saying about these habits. And I think that there's a period of noticing that sometimes happens before the actual change. So I relate to that thing where you're noticing it before you can change it.
Yeah. And it's just because I was kind of born with it, let's say, that default way, just changing it just through, let's say, insights is like pretty difficult. So that's what I kind of observed. So yeah, I mean, something again about my experience. So now coming back to your book now, tell me about your personal favorite. Is this loving-kindess practice, or is there like, or maybe you can tell me the second favorite, again, strategy that could be again helpful for our self-criticism and like improve our self-talk, or just calibrate it maybe.
Yes, thank you. So, as a research nerd, I have to be honest that the practices in the book, the two practices with the greatest amount of research evidence that show that they decrease self-criticism, are loving-kindness meditation and mindfulness meditation. So again, practices that don't come from the West, but have the best research evidence in terms of decreasing self-criticism. And it's so funny because when my students begin to meditate, the first thing that happens almost is that they criticize themselves about the meditation. Meditation is so hard. You try to focus on the breath, your mind goes everywhere, and you think, I'm terrible. Meditation is terrible. It's all terrible. I can't do this. I'm awful. I tried to focus on the breath. I got distracted. And then you notice that habit. Okay, I criticize myself about everything, even if it's about not paying attention to my breath. And then you can sit with that, if you can tolerate it. And after 100 or 1,000 times, you stop the practice of criticizing yourself so that you're just noticing. My mind went away. I brought it back. My attention wandered. I brought it back. So it's not something terrible. It's just what happened. And that seems to be the key ingredient through which mindfulness meditation decreases self-criticism. But it's hard. So I actually encourage people to start with just one breath to reduce self-criticism, and maybe say to yourself, inhale, my friend, exhale, my friend. This you can do in an elevator. You can do it while you brush your teeth. Just inhale, my friend, exhale, my friend, because it is hard to criticize yourself while you are calling yourself a friend. That is difficult.
So, and in your, so people who, let's say, who want to start, what have you observed? Like, how long does it usually take for people to actually get into it and see the effects of it? Like month, 2 months, how long does it usually take in your observation?
That's an excellent question. I teach 4-week classes, so they have 8 sessions, and the evidence too, but not just me, but other researchers, is that the end of 8 sessions, or 4 to 8 weeks, you can get some really good effects. But I would expect the first 2 weeks, if you're going to try out a mindfulness meditation approach, to be very difficult. So for me, beyond the issue of self-criticism, I was restless. I would sit there, try to meditate, and I would think, I have to get up. I have to do this. I have to do that. I can't sit here. And my body would want to get up. And I noticed this for actually a few months. My body wanted to get up. And I was upset about it because I wanted to focus on meditation. I wanted inner peace. I didn't want to be having these thoughts. It was very upsetting. And so after a few months of practice, I noticed that I wanted to get up, but it wasn't as strong an urge. And I could say more gently, oh, there it is. It was kind of a friend. Like, oh, I know that one. I know that. There's the urge of wanting to get up. And it didn't bother me as much. And then after a few more months, I just didn't have it as much. I had other challenges, but that one sort of faded a little bit. So it's a really excellent way to notice your thoughts without acting on them, trying not to judge them. When you judge your thoughts, less you have more available energy to change them, because the judgment is so strong, right? It holds them rigid. But if you can just notice them really gently, you can do more experimentation. Well, what if I approach it this way? What if I count the breaths? How does that work? Do I stay more focused? Okay, let's try it out.
And okay, so I'm going to ask you like a slightly deeper question about this. Are there any theories that you've come across that why this works, like for these things as well? Like, why should a mindfulness-based thing, which is focusing on, let's say, something, either a breath or something, being mindful, should help you with, and I guess the non-judgment part is there as well, right? Maybe that's the part which is usually, but to have such effects, right? Are there theories on what's the mechanism behind it, why it works so well?
Absolutely. And not just theories, actual research. So I love this article by Jordan Quaglia and colleagues in 2016 about the mechanism. Why does mindfulness reduce depression? And the key ingredient appears to be reducing non-judgment. So people think of mindfulness as you have to stay focused. What if we think about it differently? So what if it's not so much about staying focused, but accepting that your mind wandered and bringing it back without judgment? So instead of how closely can you pay attention to the breath, the question becomes, how non-judgmental can you be when your attention goes away? How kind and gentle? Oh, attention went away, time to gather it back. Attention went away, come back again. And then that's the muscle. That's the workout. That's the rep. It's not staying focused. It's bringing it back again, 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 again.
And you're saying that transfers to other areas of life where you've developed the muscle, and now you can just you can just accept it the way it is, like just see it and observe it without having to really judge. And
absolutely, people report that. And actually meditation is associated with less bias towards other people, better relationships, having other people think that you're more caring at your work. So there are lots of different benefits, and the evidence is strong that even though it's a training session for attention and non-judgment, that then it has an effect on these other realms of life.
Yeah, because I'm sure, because even for depression, like one of the key factors, like which is like a contributing factor to depression, is rumination, right? And for anxiety, of course, this is the worry. So worry is usually in literature, I've seen that worry is for the future part, of course, and rumination is for the past. And usually self-related rumination, that's what really causes all those emotions. So like if you are able to meditate, what really affects you is the negative part of it. If you're just ruminating, let's say about good memories, obviously we won't even call it rumination. It's repeated negative thinking, is RNTs. Some people actually summarize it as that. So yeah, I see that. So in a way, like as you see, this is like such a magic pill, right? In that regard, which is your relation to yourself, your relation with the future and the past, and everything negative. The fact that if you just develop the muscle of taking the judgment away and observe an acceptance and be able to accept it in a way, that is such a superpower. And I guess, are you aware of ACT? Like, do you have any experience or like in that acceptance commitment therapy? Like, have you?
I don't have personal experience with it, but I do know a little bit about it. And I think it is very promising because accepting difficult emotions as part of being human seems to be associated with better mental health. Do you use ACT? Is that something
exactly. So I cherry pick the ideas from it, of course, in my overall work, and I don't really stick to any particular thing. But yeah, I see the similarity parallels here because on one hand, we have through mindfulness, we get to non-judgment, which is ultimately leading to acceptance. And the other way, you just directly go to acceptance through, again, cognitive therapy, which is through better thoughts, starting with just accepting your emotions, negative emotions themselves, and then going on to accept almost, you can say, radical acceptance. You can accept almost every part of life, right? So I see that if people can see these parallels and these larger patterns, how important being able to just not judge and accept is. Like, it's kind of like one of the biggest pillars of mental health, I would say. And whatever I talk about, usually I find myself somewhere talking about acceptance only, like in some manner. So it just keeps coming back. And so it's very interesting to see how we can come to the same state through like different angles. So that's actually great to see. So, and tell me about just if you, okay, this part we can edit. How long do we have with you? Like,
oh, another 20 or 30 minutes
20,
is
30
fine.
minutes?
Whatever is right for you. Yes.
All right. So great. I wanted to know a little bit about this work with, because your first book was on PTSD and trauma, right? So could you give us a little more insight into that? So of course, there is research, and in fact, I've also understood it. So could you talk about the evidence and also the mechanism there? And we can start with defining trauma and PTSD for the audience as well. Like, what state what do we really call trauma and PTSD? So yeah.
Yeah, the definition of trauma isn't something everybody agrees about. So this is a little bit difficult. The idea is that trauma is something that is overwhelming. It's a bad experience, whether it's a medical illness, or you lose somebody close to you, or you get attacked, that is overwhelming, that you just can't really cope with or process in the moment. And it leaves behind some suffering of different kinds, whether it's anxiety or being hypervigilant or scared, or having memories come back into your head, or images when you don't want them, dissociating or going away in your mind. So there are these collection of symptoms that you might have one, you might have several. But I think that the definition of trauma has been very narrowly focused. And I think that it was like that out of tradition in the United States, that this is the tradition. the definition was made for Vietnam veterans, American soldiers coming back from Vietnam. And it was used to describe their experiences, which were terrible, but that's just one facet of this vast array of human suffering. So now we know from the evidence that there are many other types of experiences that are traumatizing. Being bullied is very traumatizing, even if you don't necessarily think that your bullies are going to kill you. Being bullied is still traumatizing, and it leaves some of the same effects. So my definition of trauma is bigger. Even a breakup of a relationship, it might not threaten your life, but something
that leaves a mark on you, maybe, right? Like a mark in a negative way, like in the long run. Well, something to some degree they damage something inside, like to some degree, right? Or you can call it like, again, that may have maladaptive responses later on. Like, so for example, I mean, you could almost drown in your childhood, and then you're scared from water like the rest of your life. Now you can't even enjoy swimming. So we can say like things like that just left a mark on you. So before we of course, mindfulness is known to work there, and we'll get into that. But this is again, out of curiosity, is Freudian approach still used anywhere? Like, have you seen that, or is it now completely out of date for childhood traumas or any traumas, or do you see it being still
That's a fascinating question. I think mostly out of date, but it depends on where you are. I think Freud is very difficult. Like you said, people prefer all or nothing, good or bad.
Yeah.
And Freud is really interesting because he has some theories that are completely unfounded in evidence and that we just need to throw away. And then other theories like having an unconscious. Now we know this is absolutely true.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have many thoughts and brain activity that we're not aware of. So that is a very valuable contribution. And I also think that a very valuable contribution by Freud was that childhood events affect us as adults and help shape some of our emotions. And we don't want to overthink that, to think that everything has to do with childhood, but much of it does. So I think that is useful.
So that approach of, let's say, talking to your client for hours and hours and just getting into what could be, is that still anywhere used, or because it's pretty expensive, to be honest?
Yes. It is. But there's so many different psychologists who have different approaches. So some people do use that approach. And I absolutely like to understand what has happened in people's backgrounds. But I usually ask them how much they want to explore it and not insist. Some people just want to focus on one way about what's happening right now and learn new techniques. And some people want to explore a little bit more. But because my background is in trauma, I am aware of all the evidence, or much of it, that events in our past do affect us. I don't like the term PTSD because I don't like the D. I don't like thinking of this as a disorder. This is a normal thing to be affected by negative experiences. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. In fact, it's just an example of learning. Like if you're attacked when you're walking home, you're going to be more nervous the next time because your brain has learned that this is something bad that can happen. It doesn't mean that there aren't approaches to help those symptoms, but it does not mean that, in my opinion, that you have a disorder.
So you're saying that, again, for that Freudian approach, people are still currently using it. And I would say, to the degree, if you can, let's say, reach somebody's past and actually be able to. So I think this can happen in ways where you haven't even discovered your trauma yet. So you're just seeing symptoms, right? You're just seeing some odd behavior, odd reactions. And then you ask them a lot of questions, and they can actually reach, maybe it started because somebody actually ridiculed me in the school, let's say. And now whenever somebody jokes, I just react very aggressively, right? So I got a lot of ridicule. So sometimes to discover where it could originate from, I think to that degree, it may have some utility. So that you can realize, okay, why is this originating from that one place? And maybe you can rise above it a little bit, right? What do you think?
I agree. And I'm not sure I would call that Freudian. Nowadays, I would probably use the term trauma-informed. Like when people tell me, I've always just been a critical person. This is just how I am. Sometimes I say, I don't agree. I think this is a bad habit and you're not alone. And I would expect this is more common. I don't know if this happened to you, but people who are criticized a lot by their parents or their peers or their teachers are more likely to be self-critical. So has that happened to you? Did you get criticized in your past?
Yeah. So now coming to you and your life, right now, are you? So you said you have 3 kids, right?
3, yes, that's right.
And how long have you been married?
I was married in 2011, so it's been 11 years.
11 years. And your kids are what age? All 3?
3, 6, 9.
3, 6, 9. All right. So now my audience and like my work has usually been like largely around parenting and relationships, right? So I know your particular research work is not around that, but this is now from you, like Dr. Rachel Turow as an individual also. So tell us a bit about like in your 11 years of marriage, like what are your key learnings and insights which you think that has made it work for you? And if you can keep even the psychologist hat aside and just like, okay, for us, it worked. Okay. Like this is what worked for me. So if you could tell us.
Well, I think that, right, being in a relationship, being in a marriage, having a kid, a child, or just having parents, these are all challenges, even with people that you love, right?
Yeah.
There can be conflict and difficulty. One of the things that helps me a lot when I'm feeling sort of activated or upset is to ask for a break. And I've started asking kids telling them that they can take a break too. We don't have to talk about this right now, but let's plan on talking about this tomorrow because this is important. But in my experience, you're unlikely to have a really good conversation if you're both feeling upset or angry or hurt. And then another thing I really like to keep in mind that is sort of work from myself as a psychologist too, is that there isn't just one person who's right? I'm going to have my whole emotional experience and you can have all of yours, and those both can exist, and the kids can have theirs. And it doesn't mean one person is right or wrong, but all of those emotions can be there.
So tell us about what are the most difficult challenges right now with your children? Like what are the ongoing ones which like keep occurring? Because every household is unique, but there are patterns also. So what do you face the most in your house?
Well, my kids are different ages, so it's hard when I'm with them and it's just me as an individual to kind of give them all the attention simultaneously because they all need this. And it will result in me feeling maybe guilty or ineffective because I can't help all 3 of them all the time in every moment. And so sometimes I have to say, please wait, I'm doing this thing now.
Yeah, everybody wants attention, mommy, mommy, mommy.
Exactly. And sometimes they'll even fight about, hugging me or, oh no, I get the tummy about how they want to hug me. And it's, on the one hand, it's nice that they want to be close, but
on the hierarchy of problems, it's a good problem to have.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I think also just keeping in perspective that it's like you say about an individual, we're not going to be happy all the time. And that acceptance is so important. I have to do that in family life for myself. Okay, one of my kids is upset. That's the reality, the radical acceptance. And it doesn't mean that I have to feel terrible or that this is awful. This is just the truth of it. And also teaching kids, everybody gets sad sometimes. Everybody's unhappy sometimes. It's okay to be angry with me. Are you still angry with me? How can I help?
And the most recurring pattern, because I'm sure I don't know if you're aware of Dr. John Gottman,
oh, yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
We are actually very inspired by his work, seems very scientific. And of course, he has done years of research. So I have read his books also. So he usually says, on average, 70% of conflicts are actually never resolved. You just learn to adapt. So in your marriage, what do you think has been the most, was a persistent issue, which was the hardest for you to resolve or still is probably, what do you think?
I think that my husband and I have really different strengths. So he can take the kids out for an outing and have lots of energy for those few hours and get them there. And sometimes I don't want to do that. It just feels too overwhelming to, pack them all up and take them out and navigate. And so I'm really happy that he can do that. But then what I can do is I can keep going all day long. I can do 12 hours in a row of taking care of everybody. After the outing, he just wants to relax. That was enough energy. So, I think that instead of seeing this as a problem, that, okay, he already spent his energy for the day and now I'm on my own. I actually think this has it helped me to see this more as just a difference. So I can do the stamina and then he can do that big burst of energy. And actually the balance of that is really good.
So you changed your expectation there. Like earlier, probably it was like, why are you not able to do this? And but now you're like, okay, maybe we have our own strengths. And so let's just be good with that. So, okay.
Exactly.
All right. And what do you personally do for rest, recreation, fun? Like what is your, in life, how do you, again, unwind? Because you, of course, do a lot of work and this work can also be heavy. So, yeah.
Yes, I am a singer. So I like to sing in my choir. I like to sing Renaissance music, and my choir just had a concert a few days ago. And
is that stuff on YouTube? Like anything on YouTube?
Yes, my choir's name is Sine Nomine. I don't think it is on YouTube, but it's part of the Seattle Early Music Society. And there's a wonderful early music scene. So these were songs that were written hundreds of years ago that we think are beautiful, that we still keep alive today. And I had a very intense weekend with all of the kids, and it was raining. We couldn't do anything. But when I got to rehearsal, I had to think in a different way. It's very demanding to sing the correct notes and to focus. And it really helped shift some of my thinking away from, that was so intense or difficult, to like, okay, now we're making music. This is a different thing that I'm doing.
Actually, I was not aware that there was a thing called Renaissance music, because we've heard of the period of that, but I did not know that music is still there. Like, so it must be lyrical, right? Like it's full of content also, right? Like from those times, or is it mostly instrumental, or like just vocals, and like how is it?
Yeah, there's both. There's vocal and instrumental. My choir does all vocal, and it's very demanding music because we're not singing the same thing at the same time. So the men might be singing one thing, the women sing something else in different parts, but it just all fits together like a tapestry. Some of it is in English, some of it is in Latin or French or German, Flemish, and it's always a challenge to learn something new. And it's really fun to sing. I enjoy it.
I think I'm going to look up Renaissance music right after this. So I'm actually now curious to know. And you should put this up on YouTube or your website also. I'm sure your fans would really like to see that.
And what about you? How do you relax? What do you like to do?
So, of course, the go-to is usually I love to watch Netflix, obviously, like a lot of TV shows. And in fact, we have kind of grown up watching UK and US TV shows. So we might have watched a lot of stuff that you probably do as well, or maybe your kids also. So that's one. And another one is I actually... so I also was in music like growing up, but right now we are just not able to do that. But we used to play a lot of instruments, and my dad made sure like keyboard and congo, and even like brief time I tried my hand on guitar. So that's what I used to do. But I actually I enjoy taking walks a lot. I enjoy going to the gym. That actually really relaxes me, at least mentally. Physically, it is tiring, and yeah. It turns out, in last few years, now that I'm talking about it, my the variety in my recreation has actually really gone down. Like I used to do so many things. Now it has come down to just very few things because of busyness. But yeah, I enjoy watching poker and playing poker as well once in a while. So that's something I really enjoy. So yeah, these are some of those things.
I'm glad.
Yeah. So I think we've kept you really long. Is there anything that you want to say, like at the end from your side? So please do share. Anything?
Yes. Well, I'm just really glad to connect with you. I think that these themes are really important to me in my work, but also just in the people I see around me. I think that it's really common to just think that we're not good enough, we're not doing enough, we're not accomplishing everything that we'd like. And even if you don't speak to yourself in words, I think that often comes across in just a general habit of how you relate to yourself. But just because you have one style of relating to yourself does not mean that you have to keep this style forever. There really are ways to change it. There's not just one approach. That's why I described 6 different approaches in the self-talk workout. And so I have confidence that every person can find an approach that is helpful and effective for them in changing how they relate to themselves for the better.
And where can people find your book? Like where is it available? Is it, could you
It's on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon
digital
if
also?
you like.
Is it like
workout? Yes, there's going to be an ebook and an audiobook or a paperback. So whichever you prefer.
Yeah, because I'm not sure if the paperback will be delivered in India. Would it be or?
I certainly hope so. There's also, you could get it through the publisher. It's Penguin Random House, and also by Shambhala. The publisher is Shambhala.
Okay.
So you all have websites that you can go to. If the Amazon website doesn't look like it's helpful, you can try another bookseller and just Google the self-talk workout, and you should be able to get it.
So people, if you found good insights here, and her idea is really cool, because I personally definitely did. So I really recommend go check out her work, her book, in fact, both of her books. And I'm it's almost guaranteed that everybody will find at least something which they can really apply and do something with it, right? It could be the cognitive techniques, or it could be the mindfulness based one, but something will be useful. So I recommend it to everybody. And so Dr. Rachel Turow, thank you so much for joining. And I also had fun talking. Thank you for sharing about your life and your work. So honor to have you.
Thank you so much. Lovely to meet you.
All right.
Best wishes to you.
Same.